guys, so thank you so much for taking part today. First sort of figure we've drawn out from the report is that 72% of UK-based 18 to 30-year-olds would consider living and working in another country in the short or the long term. So my first question to you all is, would you consider yourselves part of that 72%?
In the UK, we have a lot of opportunities in terms of education. So although there are things that would lead young people to leave, there are also things that provide us with ample opportunities that I know that other countries don't have. So it's kind of finding the balance between understanding that we are at certain advantages by living in the UK, but also recognizing that there might be other opportunities for us.
I think the idea of like living abroad and like even working abroad kind of gives you that wider world perspective. I think we live in a era of greater globalization. A lot of people consider themselves to be global citizens and not all just one country.
We hear a lot about the graduate climate and how there aren't a lot of jobs for specific careers, and sometimes there are more opportunities abroad, and because of that it means that young people are seeking opportunities in other countries or in other places in the world because they think that they'll be more successful in their careers.
I think a big factor is like the cost of living, and like for me it's not necessarily a specific country in mind. It's, you know, like a lot better than like the UK, or it's somewhere that I'd like really like to go. It is just kind of more of like a wanting to leave the UK and like the current like economic climate that is like at the minute, and maybe hopefully it'd be better elsewhere.
I'm also part of that group. I feel like the UK is quite unsafe at the moment with high rates of crime, and also just the transport systems and just the public healthcare is just really bad at the moment because of the lack of funding. I don't really want to live in a world where, I mean, that is the norm, and it just makes life so much harder.
Have you guys thought about other countries that you'd think about maybe going to, where you would like to work, with you feel there might be more opportunities?
So I've thought of Canada for sure. I think because of, I guess, there is English-speaking element to it. But I've also thought of, as a part of being part of the African diaspora, I've been thinking about maybe Ghana and places like that where there are developments being made, because I think there are opportunities that are available for young people in those arenas, and they would be invited in because they have fresh ideas, and those ideas could support the growth and development in those countries as well.
I'd probably say Singapore, just because I just feel a lot safer there in a place where the crime rate is so low, and also the opportunities for career growth are really good.
I'm not particularly too certain like that is exactly true. Just 'cause I come from like a working class background, so I know the trouble, like the struggles that like both my parents have had. Like my nan, immigrant from Jamaica, money was tight for them. Knowing like how like they grew up, I don't think there's that much of a difference between me and them in that sense. My dad, he's like a black man, so I know that about like the racism that he grew up with like throughout the 70s up until, well, even now.
I think we have more opportunity for social mobility than the generation before to kind of move social classes. However, we have more opportunity to do that, but it's harder, I think, especially because the economic climate we're living in. It's like you can't really buy a house if you look at the house prices. And then you have older generations telling us to stop drinking coffee, and if we stop buying coffee, we'll be able to buy houses. And that is just so unrealistic, because if I want a house, let's say I want a house in London, decent, not in the house, I want a flat in London, maybe 2 bedrooms, I'm looking at £500,000. It's like we're in a catch-22. And so we see the gap between like the rich and the poor getting wider.
It just because you said about like social mobility and like there's more opportunity, but do you not think that that's not necessarily like social mobility, it's kind of like maintaining the social class gap?
That's why I said there's more opportunities for social mobility. There's not more social mobility, but there's more opportunity. And so it looks like there's not more social mobility on the wide scale of society.
I think our struggles are different, because I know my mum's generation had it, well, she had it a lot worse than me in some ways. She's a first generation immigrant. There was a lot of barriers for her in education, like her family didn't want her to pursue education, and she had really low attendance, and now the government's actually intervening with that, making sure that doesn't happen for young people. And also there was a lot of stigmas around mental health, so she didn't really get any support regarding that. And I'm grateful that the government's actually intervening with that as well, and actually encouraging more people to go into employment.
if you look at how young people voted, they didn't vote to leave. So I think the questions like he always wanted good relationships with Europe. We need relationships with Europe. They're our closest neighbours. Our economies are so intertwined. I think you can't have Britain without Europe.
Opportunities to study abroad were so much more available or readily available when we were part of the EU. And if we're thinking about how to broaden young people's experience and understanding of the world, that was a big way that young people were able to do that. So young people aren't able to as freely travel in Europe and study in Europe as they were previously. And I think a lot of people benefited from that.
But also, I think we live in a global world. I think we have a lot of room and a lot of space to actually expand and go and talk people. And that was one of the big things about Brexit.
In a lot of the campaigns for Brexit, a lot of minoritized people were being scapegoated to say like Brexit will reduce immigration and just different things like that. And the idea of like British values and being British doesn't mean being part of the EU. And I think in that case, leaving the EU has kind of made a lot of race relations in the UK really hostile. Domestic issues are important because they're impacting us right now. We can feel the problems that they cause for us in our lives. But I think also with being in an age of social media, being in an age of globalization and understanding that the world has big problems that need to be solved, I can understand why young people believe that the UK should have an impact or be leading in international aid. And I think there are certain issues in the world that are happening right now that the UK hasn't had a strong enough voice in stopping them or challenging them or saying what's right.
It's a hard balance to strike. So it's like we want to conquer in the UK gender-based violence. That's a huge issue. That's a huge global issue too. So it's like, okay, so how can we take things from other countries and international problems and international solutions and actually apply them in the UK? You know, how can we take solutions we've done domestic in the UK and apply them in international context and adapt them? I think it's about shared learning, and I think violence, terrorism doesn't know borders, racism doesn't know borders. And these are issues that affect us here in the UK. They're domestic issues, but they're also global issues. I think sometimes we can get very bogged down, it's like the UK-centric, and it's like, okay, but let's go out to the world, and we're part of that world.
The ability for young people to influence global decisions is limited to what policymakers are willing to hear. So issues like climate change, because they know like most voters care about that, they'll be more open to hearing about it. But I think when it comes to international relations, the scope for young people to actually make any change is very small.
So on one hand, I do think it's possible for people to have an impact on global issues because of social media and because there are campaigns that can be run and young people can have their voices heard and spotlight the voices of other young people who are going through certain things, and that can eventually have a change in what's happening. But I think people forget that there are so many people on the ground who have been working on these issues for decades, for a long time, and it's not just us as young people that are the ones that are going to change things. I think things like COP 29, I think this year, I'm not sure, those things can support young people in having changes globally. Thinking about solutions and having that collaboration between countries is also really important.
That feeling of apathy is just so strong. It just feels like you're stuck. I think it's really important for young people to be politically involved and to understand that they can make change. But I also think it's so important for the system to adapt and to allow young people to make change.
I think it's like a recurring cycle where policymakers aren't appealing to young people because they're not most of their voters, but then young people don't want to vote because policymakers aren't appealing to them. So I think more work just needs to be done in actually incentivizing young people to go and vote.
People don't understand like the issues that they care about are political. Like a lot of people that I know, they say that they don't do politics, but do care about how bad their school was, or like he said, like the transport's bad, the food prices. These issues that they just see as an inconvenience are actually a political issue that can be solved. If people had better political education, they'd understand the impacts of it a bit more, the benefits and also negatives. They can come to a well-balanced conclusion.
Young people need to realise that on a local level, there's an impact they can have. Young people have opinions about where they live, have opinions about what needs to change, what could be improved, and they can drive those opinions forward.
I love that. That's a great ending note, I think. Thank you so much, guys.